It's time to paint a Mardi Gras Fabius Bile. So color scheme for this: purple, green, and gold. Also going to have some silvers and stuff and some blacks, and then our liquids are going to be yellow because that'll be a good offset color for those three colors, kind of a triptych. Starting with Hex Lichen as an airbrushed base coat on all of our armor details. We're lucky in a sense that Fabius Bile has a purple undertone or tone in general for his armor, so we're starting over a black and we're going to airbrush in on all these layers here. I'll turn my air pressure down, but we're going to airbrush two parts of it: the purple base coat, the green coat. So we might get some overages on top of the armor, but we'll just fix that with the brush. Just want to go ahead and kind of slam in my base colors here. Now it's really dark. You can kind of see it going on with the wet that we got with the airbrush. But I want to start with a really deep dark purple because that's what color he has. Now I've divided up my objects here. Let me pause to show you. I've got Bile here, his body, no arms, no backpack. The base is separate. We have our two shoulder pads here. We'll add those after the arms, which are also separate. The reason I kept the arms off is that he holds his arms pretty close and into his sides. And I want to be able to keep detail on the jacket and all these little tools and things that he has hanging off his belt. And then this Doc Ock-like backpack with tons of little spindly bits. Now the middle of this is going to be purple. The arms purple, one shoulder pad green, one shoulder pad purple, and then hand paint the metallics on the all the objects after we've worked up the armor. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish up airbrushing and then get back to you when we get to the green. All right, I added a drop of the white Bombay India ink and thinned down the purple a little bit in my airbrush just to bring it up one step, so I get a little bit of a fade. And again, like the Hex Lichen in the air range is way darker than the Hex Lichen in the game color range. So something to consider if you're going to use a game color and thin it down. So now I've preloaded my airbrush with thinner. I have my phthalo green from Chimera. You can use any other kind of dark green, like a goblin green. Just make sure it's saturated. Stir it up in here with my thinner. I'm gonna add probably two brush loads. The reasons I'm doing it like this with the Chimera is it's super thick. I don't want to just drop it in there because it can clog pretty easy. So I'm mixing my green and purple rinse water. So that's a nice bright green. Now again, I might cover up some of my purple. It's okay. But I'm gonna go in here and start layering in this darker saturated green with my airbrush on the cloak here. So using some heavy squirts and then just some air to dry it off. Chimera likes to clog. When you get a clog with the airbrush, you can just, take it to the side, do a few squirts to unclog it. And it's okay if you get, this kind of erratic action, as long as it's not, spidering out on you and doing that sort of mess. So short, controlled bursts, just like in Aliens. Good movie if you haven't seen it. Go see it. I'm going to continue to coat this, maybe try to unclog my airbrush before I go any further. Well, of course the airbrush starts working as soon as I shut off the camera. So I've got all my greens laid in. Now I'm trimming these, since I'm not spraying or priming anymore. I'm trimming my pins because I'm going to use a pin vise to hold these while I paint them. So I have one of these nice knobby guys and I can just chuck in my model and I have a nice handhold to paint with while I'm painting. Now we're going to start developing our purple armors with the brush. So I got my Chimera Violet. Again, you can use a night blue or another really dark purple to work up from. and my dead white to mix with. So I'm going to take one of my detail brushes here. Let's start with shoulder pad just to sort of get a basic feel for the paints. I always like to start with like a sub part before you go to the main body when we're working, and mix up a little bit brighter purple than our base color. Still super saturated. That's one of the things I really like about these Chimera paints. And then develop our lighting scheme. So I know this hose is going to attach on his viewer's right shoulder. So I'm gonna go ahead and lay in some lighter color here. Sort of brighten up the front of them. Not worried about edge highlights or anything yet. And we can always go back and ink around our gold, which we are going to do, because this trim is going to be gold. And just leave this darker area down here. Now, I do a brush lick. You can thin out paint on your palette just to glaze this transition really quickly. And then we'll mix up probably one more step. I got my two colors separated here on my palette. And then go up a little bit brighter right here. I want to keep these colors kind of bright since we're going for Mardi Gras. I want them to be nice and punchy. Not go like super desaturated or anything, but just punchy. Brush lick, and then sort of glaze. You can glaze by dragging up into your color that you're working with from your shadow. You saw those quick little brush strokes there. Or you can kind of dip and dot along that line where you're going to blend the colors together. So now our shoulder pad has a nice transition up to where the highlight area is. And then we want to add some edge highlights. For edge highlighting, I'll probably use this highlight color for the bottom areas. And I'll have to slow down, working fast. Just pull a little line here, and then connecting line down this way along the bottom edge. And then another connecting line, just again, like going through our previous colors, giving a nice sort of accent, a shape identifier. Now as we go up with our edge highlights, mixing a little bit above what we did for our high highlight, adding in here little highlights between all these little chaos stars and crosses. Re-emphasize this one on the back side a little bit. And same on the front here. A little line there. And probably step it up one more time. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 steps of purple on my palette. And go a little bit thinner with my lines on this top area. So you can be a little bit fatter with your first edge highlights, but now we got good interior shoulder shape. Now let's do some highlights on the body. Took me a minute to think. Alright, so addressing some of the green overspray that we have on the armor, we're going to knock them out with just highlights. So I'll go back over here to this color, mix up. You can see I can have a good reference here on my palette. And then front of the leg, see how we got this green here? We're just going to cover that with highlight. And chimeras do work pretty thick, so thick with really good coverage. You can be thinner with your paint. Now I gotta do a little bit of a kind of a non-metallic scheme, so highlighting up to the crest here. I'm gonna need on the top of the foot to add some of my pure purple back in, just so I can have that shadow color right next to the higher highlights. And this isn't studio level, I don't think I've addressed that yet. This is high tabletop. So I know I've done some mid tabletop videos. This is our third tier in kind of the play model. We don't usually expect people to play with like the display models since they're several $100s. But sometimes we do get requests for that. Adding in some more shadow down here across the foot, and then I'm going to build these up a couple layers. I'll come back and show you that when we're done. Alright, one leg highlighted up, so we went to our mid-tone for our flat highlights. When I say flat highlights, I mean anywhere that's in the panel area. And we went really high with the white for some of the edge highlights. Now it is important to note that you need to layer up your edge highlights. So my normal paneling is kind of in here, and then my edge highlights also layer up here. So you have to pull an edge highlight and then pull another area and another area, smaller and smaller, to where you get to those points. Like you see here on the foot, you can see some darker edge highlights in the shadows. You don't want to use the same color like white edge highlight on everything, because, well, unless you're going for that Tron look, which I think works on Necrons and some other type of models. If you want like a, you know, like an electric looking stylized black armor, you can go really bright with just a solid color edge highlight. But it will look better if you do layer those as well. We're going to go in here and get this back leg. It's going to be a little bit darker than our front, but you can see, you know, the natural light's catching a lot of this toe as well, so we're going to highlight it in the same manner. And then the last section of purple is the collar back here on the back of his neck. Alright, we have the purples on Bile complete, so just kind of walk you through what we got here. We got a little bit of a leg break here for the shape of the armor. You don't see it over here because we're being covered by his nice flayed cloak. And then the collar, so we went all the way up to our white points like we did kind of on the boots, keeping that sharpness of color and that sharpness of object, really, with the way we've highlighted things. And again, one of the more complicated bits of the model is just doing the armor and this little bit on the backpack, so more leading in with edge highlights. This is going to be covered by the backpack, the little skull mount, and then these little vents on here as well. But just going ahead and adding a little bit of detail to those areas, even though they might be less seen when we have this big massive backpack attached to the back of him. So now, let's see, going back, shoulder pad, I might want to go a little bit higher with my high highlights, so I'm going to go back and add like a little bit of white to that just to balance that out. And then we're going to look at doing the small areas, the gloves, which won't be as shiny and it'll be a little more matte, so we'll go a little higher tone with those, and little elbow bits. Alright, we got our purples done. We can move on to our greens. So you can see here that I kind of did the interesting highlighting, so not necessarily realistic, but as light bleeds down the surface, you kind of have these patterns that what's it called, contrast each other value wise. And then the arms, so treated the glove more as a top highlight, and then the armors is more of, again, that go back and forth. Just put a dark color next to a light color. Doesn't necessarily make sense, but it does look interesting. Space Marines don't make sense, but they look interesting. Now we're going to move on to our green, our phthalo, for our Mardi Gras. So we're going to be treating these as little fleshy textured panels of weird green skin, I guess. So I got my pure color, take a little bit of that white. Love how this color just kind of livens up. And I'm gonna sort of sketch in where I want my highlights to be, because this is a pretty aggressive transition of colors. Make sure I'm doing this here where you can see it. And I might broaden these as I go out, but right now I'm kind of saying, like, this is definitely going to be what's highlighted. And then we'll blend it back out here in a minute. There you can see sort of what I'm going for. Hopefully you can see what I'm going for. I want this area to be larger, but accentuating those shapes within this fabric-like lattice of linked together goopy whatever. It's, I mean, like, it's supposed to be skin, but we're making it more like the cosplay of skin. Definitely kind of want to edge highlight both of those, just to make sure we're, again, accentuating the shapes on the model, exaggerating them more and more. And then I'll come back, thin down element of my pure phthalo, and I'm just going to glaze this down. I'm just going to go heavy with it. I'm going to go for it. So you see how that blends that first highlight together. You still definitely see a difference in layers, but I softened it, brought it down. Now I have a really good base to highlight up from. And I'm going to go ahead and do that step on the coat, and then we'll come back to the shoulder pad. Alright, our glaze dried. I've already gone in and started adding secondary highlights. You can see that it's a step up. It's that same color that we used before that we glazed over, and so we're building up our layers in that same vein. So now that all of our highlight areas are taken care of, we have that guideline of that first layer. This is another way for you to layer up colors and still blend them, so you can be a little rougher with where you place your blends or your highlights, and then they'll blend out once you glaze over them. I'm going to finish this up and then do another quick slapdash glaze over it. Being a little bit more careful on my edges as I build up now. Getting a little bit thinner with the layers kind of hitting the inside of where my previous colors were, and defining shapes even more as I go, where there would be brightness or lightness. And then we'll take this glaze down here, add some more water to it, and then go over the whole thing again. You can kind of see how that has blended out real nicely now. So the next layer we put on is going to be a little bit brighter. And now all that color is blended in. We have our shapes. And here's the jacket. We're going to go in and do that same thing. I've already put a glaze over it. And we're going to do a highlight, glaze again, which will soften these down even more. Look more like that. You see how this one kind of looks like that one, but it has that extra step now. So here we're back at our shoulder pad. We're about to apply the next layer. We're going just a little bit brighter so you can see the inside and the outside circle here with our highlights. And again, working inside the highlights that we had previously. So still layering, but just layering with glazes in between. And each time you go, you're going to have to get like a little bit neater with your highlights. Because if you don't, then you'll start to see the sketchy in your final highlights, because we'll be glazing those layers less than we did the previous ones, because of course, you know, this has had 2 glazes, this is going to have 1, so your blends or your layers need to be just more controlled. Alright, so now this is the after effect of glaze based paint by Cuttlefish called Jaded. So a little bit different of a tone, but works with the color, shifts it a little bit more green, less teal, but it coats really nicely. It's kind of a gel-based medium. It works really well to blend colors together. So instead of doing a final wash with our, our Chimera, we're using this to blend those colors together more, soften our transitions, and you can see the difference here in color that you get. So I'm going to go back to the cloak here, cloak coat. I could do one more, but let's see how this jaded do on the coat. Now I have some medium here to thin it down so it's even more flowy, and I'm just going to go on this one panel, just pull into my highlights, and it gives us a nice little transition color there. See how it's softening that edge more, and I can pull from my shadow too if I want. I just need to be careful to lift my brush in the highlight areas. And watch out for cratering, because the gel based, if you agitate them a little bit too much, they seem to want to half stick, which is okay, because I mean they work really good. Now you can see the difference between this panel and this panel, and you see how soft our transition is there, and just sort of feathery brush strokes with that to bring it in. Again, this is high gaming, so we're not going for incredibly smooth, because that takes a long time. And we're about hour 4 right now on these. So this is a more controlled application. It's going to take a little bit more time than our previous layers did. Just to go in here and blend this color out. Give it some nice fades in there, nicer fades. And you can layer this stuff up, so let me put it on camera here. This is the jaded color, and then this is the medium that they have. This is fairly new from Creature Caster, which is a pretty popular name in Warhammer. But one of those things you could probably get a couple primary, some off colors, or just buy for the project that you're working on. I'm trying to think. There's not too many paints I could, well, it's not any paints I could really think of to really replace what I'm doing here. You'd have to go buy your own gel medium, so maybe like an army painter medium, mix up a good bit of it. You can see how those soften out. Probably need maybe one more layer, so go around the coat and hit all these areas. Just work that color in there. So still a fairly quick step to blend all that together with the cuttlefish jaded. Now let's look at blocking in some of our golds. For that, I like to use the Vallejo liquid golds, and I'm going to start with a red gold because I want to have some depth to it before bringing it up. You gotta shake this stuff so much. It is an alcohol-based paint. Yeah, shake. And then you'll need isopropyl alcohol to clean it up. I mean, you guys that do 3D printing should be fine if you're doing resin printing, because you'll have a lot of this isopropyl alcohol around. So after shaking, should have a fairly good consistency. Mine's a little bit gummy, but stuff paints on really well. Let's see. Let's start with the shoulder pad. Let's see how opaque this covers. I love this stuff. So I'm going to coat all the gold areas, which I have the instruction booklet over here, and I'm kind of following along with what they have as far as areas. Kind of, you know, it helps me see what parts are what. So I got to paint everything gold that they've painted gold to kind of agree with the placement of where they have things, you know, in a chaos sense. Alright, we got all our gold finished, if the camera will focus. And for any of you who are watching and saw me miss these little rivets, I went back and painted them. So you can stop yelling at me through your screen now. This guy, you don't have to paint all the way to the tips of these chaos stars. You can wait till your highlight, so you're not in danger of getting gold on your purple like I did here. So that's a little correction that I'll have to go back and do. But most of the other objects went well. Don't have any real overages, unless I didn't care about the overages, because it'd be something that I'd come back and paint anyway. Like here on this little cylinder backpack, definitely the most intensive part of my gold. Probably going to go back and hit some of these areas on the back with gold, or make the decision to have them be silver or a dark bolt gun-ish metal. Same here with the shoulder pad. Always paint the inside and undersides of your shoulder pads, because you can see those. They're big and chunky. And then the cane here. Next step for these items is the Reichland Flesh Shade. So that brings even more red into the mix. We're going to do an overall with that, and then come back and do a nun oil for our shadows, and polished gold for our highlight, and then a probably aluminum, even steel would work. Steel for the Vallejo airline is fairly shiny comparatively to metallics. But that's what it will look like with the wash on, and you don't have to watch me do the whole thing. Alright, our Reichland is dry, and now we're starting to add some of our deep shadows with the nun oil. However anyone says that. So I'm just dragging this into areas that are going to have the deepest of shadows. So like, God, come on. Stupid camera. There we go. I am that guy that bitches about his camera all the time. Just adding some dark shadow underneath here, because this is naturally going to be darker underneath the shoulder pad. And then in these little holes back here, and maybe at the bottom. But it's pretty thin amount of neon oil. You need more vowels in that word. Too many consonants together. And then I drop some around the skull, in the eyes, under the teeth. You can kind of see it there. So That's what our finish is at the moment. It's going to make our highlights pop even more. And so things like this cane, I'm going to go in under the fingers, add some shadow underneath where the skull connects to that. Just, you know, use logic. And if you don't have logic, then I can't help. So anywhere that's like deep, we're not like slathering the wash on. We're picking spots where objects touch one another. Like under here is fine. It's fine. It's all fine. All right. I hope you get the point. If you don't, there's a comment section. Time to highlight our gold, and I have already started. So I'm using model color gold. Has that nice yellowy kind of offset for doing a Mardi Gras type theme. Coats like crap, but makes it pretty decent for blending highlights. Kind of gummy, but works on edges fairly well. You just can't hit it more than once. So once it's on there, to leave it alone, or you'll just wipe it off. But mainly edge highlighting for here, kind of recoated over these edges, just to, again, you can see that kind of true metallic pop out from different angles, which is the benefit of true metallics. They look better in person than on camera, in my opinion, because art is subjective. Maybe, I don't know, maybe that's subjective. Anyway, do that to all your gold stuff. Alright, after your gold is done, we're going to do a slight sepia wash. You can see here the difference the wash makes, adding back our shadows in some of the areas that may have got lost. So I did a dry brush on these skulls and then kind of point highlights here and there on the gold. And now we're going to go back and wash. The wash kind of helps blend those areas back together just a little bit, acting almost like a glaze with your acrylics in that same manner. So just evening out those colors. You can see as it goes on here. So I go on heavy and then move it around, use the brush to push it around the surface there. Now I am using a liner. I feel like the longer bristles last longer when using washes. They also help load up a lot of paint, so you don't have to use a really thick brush. So best of both worlds, you get a lot of wash and a precision point with your brushes. While our sepia wash is drying, we're going to address the base. For that, we're going to use some medium sea gray from Vallejo Model Air. I already have that added to my palette. This is going to be kind of a heavy wet brush, so not like looking for coverage per se, but a liberal top coat of color, and then we'll come back and dry brush. So getting these little edges in here, patterns, lightening everything up. Kind of even everything out. It's a little bit brighter to where the front of the model is going to be, and I want it to be that way because I like my bases to be brighter toward the front. Helps accentuate where you're supposed to view the model from. Once that previous layer is dry, we're going to take khaki from Reaper. I'm going to mix a little bit of that in, just making sure you guys can see. And we're going to actually unload the brush this time. This is just a round synthetic brush. I'm going to start on the edges. Start naturalizing a little bit, adding some of those brown tones. Not going for a completely neutral tone. And then we'll step this all the way up to the khaki here in a second. Leaving a shadow where he's going to be standing. And hitting all these areas. I like the textures of cork for doing rocks, but I know some people are getting away from it. But it's okay. It's okay to use, especially on gaming models. Alright, whipping out one of these round dry brushes. Unloading pure khaki in there. And then hitting this outline, and then we can come in. I'll lightly stipple these areas just to add even more texture, catch some of those spots, and then lightly dry brush the edges, make them stand out. And one of the reasons I'm wanting to finish this up is I want to mount him on this so we can start painting with him on it. Make it a little bit easier for the larger model to sit. Alright, now we got to address the dirt. I'm going to take a little bit of white, see if I can reactivate this. It's pretty dry. Maybe go just a tad brighter right here on the front. Just a little bit. Alright, continuing on with my base, I'm going to take some Beastie Brown from Vallejo Game Color. And I'm jumping all over the ranges here. Take some of that original stone color, that gray mix, for kind of a darker desaturated, just to blend our colors together a little bit. Like, you know, the stone's kind of falling apart and collecting here, down here on the edges. So we avoid a harsher transition on our base. And then kind of stipple like there's dirt clinging up to the edges of these rocks here. And just do a nice heavy coat on the texture here, and then we'll work it up with a dry brush. We're actually going to use a lot of heavy flock on this too. Get some of those plants and things hanging off the base. But being rough with the synthetic and making sure that gets them covered. And I do want to wait just a second for that to dry before we dry brush and add some more Beastie Brown. Alright, now we're going to dry brush with our pure Beastie. So just some quick brush strokes to hit the high points. It's okay if it gets over on your rock, it's just going to blend that in some more. And then adding some of that khaki to my Beastie, swirl my dry brush around, wipe it off, and magically get some highlights that kind of tie the tone of this entire base together. I got some dirt undertone, some rock undertone. We got a brush bristle on the base. There we go. Cool. Now we're to the point where we can glue him down to this. So he's already got a pin in his foot. I'm going to trim that after I get a rough estimate of where it would sit. So pin it to where it'll go through the base. Just using my thumb as a marker, dropping stuff. About right there. Boom. And then we take him. We say, hey, he's going to sit right here over the shadow. Give it a quick little spin to sort of mark it so I can see where it is. And just drill through the base. So once your sepia is dry, we've got him mounted, and no, his foot is not like cocked up, like not on purpose, it's on purpose. Like he's got this weird stance where his toes coming off the ground. So he's glued down. We're using our Vallejo model color steel to highlight the points and the little sharp bits and the lines, and add like a little bit of inference and difference to the model. I've got my dry palette out, which is a silicone palette from Turbo Dork. Really cool because the paints just kind of peel right out when you're done. Like this guy just disconnected. So using that way I don't get oversaturated with my metallics, because if they're oversaturated they're going to want to run everywhere and go in places I don't want them to. So I want to keep them a little gummier, a little bit drier, so that I can add the thinnest edge highlights that I can do. So all of our gold, just picking a lighting scheme. You know, I have this like from the left lighting scheme with him, so I'm doing that for my silvers on there. Alright, next step is to take your khaki and do a couple coats on the little blood collecting rag there. Keep his tools nice and infectious. Where's my sepia? I just had it. Hold on, I need to find my sepia. It was sitting right in front of me. Always do that. So shake up your sepia and get your liner out, and we're gonna do a coat over these tools here, and you see immediately get that liquid skill going. All the shadows and lines and everything just flow right into place. Be real careful around the edges here. Sort of line your shadows in, because I actually went over the edges on this as well. So when I made sure that the depth of the object was painted. And then in here, and then we'll come back when that dries and we'll re-highlight. While that's drying, get your gunmetal out. Model Air gunmetal. Let's go. And I'm going to take, so this is what I call like a step down brush. I was using it for detail, but now I'm going to start using it for metallics because the bristles are getting shorter. And you can see here, you see how much of that bristle. I've been using this brush for about 6 months, and that is just friction over time sanding down the brush. They're both the same size, they're both size 0s, and that's how much of the tip has been worn down from painting. As I said, you can't make a brush last forever. I mean, you can if you paint 10 models in your lifetime, but if you paint a bunch of models, you're gonna have to replace your tools or step them down. So now we're going in with our gunmetal. You see how awesome that Vallejo Air gunmetal coats. And we are going to start painting the details. Not worrying about getting overages on these hoses or anything, or any parts that aren't finished. But keeping control where we need it, and then using speed where we don't need the control. So this device kind of latches into his heart here. So we're being real careful not to cover up our work on the fabric. That green fabric. But going in, we're going to be painting all the parts. On the gun arm, there's a few, the little rings and stuff hanging off the shoulder pads and that. And then the big part is the backpack. So there's a lot of parts to paint gunmetal on this. And using the instructions, the picture that's on the instructions for kind of a guideline of where things are placed. There's a mixture of black armor panels and a very gunmetal-esque metal that's on these. So, be back in a little while. It's non-oil time, so I got my shade out. We're gonna put that over all our metal areas because it's pretty dark in the shadows and then brought up fairly high. Again, I go heavy and just kind of move the wash around, and then when I get to edges, I go real light touch. Touch it in there so that it'll collect right next to the intersection there. And that's about it for explaining washing. I mean, there are all different ways to do it. Some people put glosses on before I just like to slather it on. Make sure that it seeps down in the cracks around objects like that, just to give it a nice border and an object separation. So while your black wash is drying, get out some of the khaki from before. Mine was dry, so I got out more. And then we're going to highlight up this little tool belt here. I missed a spot. This whole spot's supposed to be khaki. This is going to be the video of clay missing spots on the model. Alright, so I'll go back and wash that. But for now, let's continue highlighting. So it's just a subtle highlight for this guy. If you want it to be more extreme, you can add some white to your khaki, but for this we're keeping it kind of dulcet. Is that a correct word to use in this situation? And I'll do a second coat real quick on that. Get it covered. And then for the tools, we're just going to do a gunmetal, like we did the like this up here, and then hit it with a wash. But we need to go back with our steel and add highlights to this once our wash is done. So to do that, steel or aluminum or any of the higher end steel looking metallics, metal. Some areas I'm going to dry brush, other areas I'll hit and do more of like spot highlight. I'm going to take a little bit. This is the that Series 7 steps down, and I'm just doing kind of brush strokes from the top here, real light, and just highlighting that area, so you can kind of see the difference in tone between there and there. You get a few more peaks in your highlight. For things like the backpack, these have more of an edge lit sort of highlight, so I'll drop that. You can drag your brush along sideways on these arms just to illuminate those edges a little bit more, and then do a little bit of a dry brush on these areas that have more texture. So these long arms, again, just kind of edge it like, you know, like that. Make that noise when you do it. And then same in here with all these little, you can do like a straight down dry brush. And it's okay if a little bit of steel gets on the gold, because we already highlighted the gold with the steel. Alright, your dry brush should be done. I went in, I forgot to do this area. This is the model of forgetting things. And then added some base colors. So dead flesh to the tubing that looks like flesh, which is these guys right here. So any of those tubes on the model that have that stuff poking through, the little ribbed things, so around here. And we're going to add a wash to that in a minute. The canisters, base coated black. The wires here, base coated black. Here. All these wires that are hanging down off this backpack, there are a lot of them. And then these little power airs and these panels. So there's panels with little chaos stars and stuff on them. So these are painted black. We're going to go back and edge highlight those later. Here on this guy, we went and painted the tools bolt gun, washed them black, and then highlighted them with the Vallejo steel. We also did a base coat on these wires with a, where'd it go? God, I'm losing stuff. The blue-gray pale. Again, coats really well for light colors. We're going to go back and use a yellow. We also used that here. So decide what color we want to use. Probably a contrast on these, and then go back and highlight a base coat of black here on this tube. And I don't think I'm missing anything. And then here, oh, started to paint in the collar. I did not realize, again, the video of missing stuff. This guy has a collar that runs up to his cheekbones. So working on adding my colors from the teal coat all the way up onto his cheeks. What else? The cane base coated black, and then the wire base coated black, and then here the insides of these canisters black, this one, and the wire here. And this shoulder pad is done after our dry brush. So all these rings, we did our bolt gun black wash and then a little pip of a highlight, so we got one part done. Yay. So now we're going to use our whatever that green shade, Coelia. Yeah. Open that up. Get your liner out. Give it a rinse if it isn't already wet. And then we're going to put that on these little dead flesh wires here, just to tint them a little bit, give them a kind of a icky look. And then we'll go back and highlight with our dead flesh again. This also helps to kind of line the area. Again, I like objects to look separated. And then this up here will look a lot better once we get that, yeah, I like that dark shadow that goes around it. Just makes it so much cleaner to have that little dark line that runs around the object. Washes are really good for that. Yeah. Alright. I had a couple more hoses. Fleshy hoses. That is probably going to get this video taken down. Whoops. Hope not. I'll forget I said it. But let's not say that again. Let's say fleshy cable wrap. It's not better. Okay. Cool. So those are done. I got a little bit of that green tint to them. And then we'll come back with our dead flesh in a minute when that dries and give it a wash. No, give it a highlight. Alright, we're going to do some edge highlights on some hoses and some panels. So for that we have the Pro Acrylic Black and the Ultramarine Blue from Reaper. Yes, Ultramarine is a color, not just a Space Marine faction. And then some Dead White from Vallejo Game Color. 3 brands of paint all mixed together. Where did I set down my other brush? No, I stuck it in the thing over here. Do that and I lose stuff. Alright, so we're going to take our black, find some room on the palette, a little bit of this white. Probably be a good first step. Might darken it down just a little bit. There we go. Avoid this pool of gold. And we're not, the cane's got kind of a green shade to it, so we're going to wait for that. I might also like paint it silver. I'm just thinking about it. So just dragging kind of a line along the side of the hose, so you get a nice highlight from both sides. We can also go in here and sort of hit the ribbing with this color in between the arms and the knees and things. It's a hard piece to hold on to. I'm not using my holder like I should be. We got a hose on this shoulder pad. We're going to wait until we attach it to the model to highlight that. But I want to get all these little details done, mainly on this arm, before I go in and do that. I'm just going to hit this one from the outside. And then the backpack's got a ton of them. And let me just paint one completely up to kind of show you where we're going without watching me put a slightly light blue-gray onto objects. Blow on it. It's cold. So just adding a little bit of color and a little bit of value to our hoses. You can see that we got increment. You can go up brighter than this. You can go up one more step. But be sparing with it. So just a little bit at the beginning there. A little bit at the top here. And there we go. We got our hoses, so we're going to go in and do that to all our hoses. We're also going to do the panels that way. So remember before I was talking about incremental edge highlights with the purple armor? We're going to do that with these black panels. Alright, hoses are all highlighted. We have our steps of edging done on them, little bip bip right there. Now we're going to focus on doing the yellow for the goop that Mr. Fabius Bile likes to carry around. For that we're using Sulphurous Brown. It's very yellowy brown. I've added it here to my palette, and we're going to work up from black. Looking for my pen vise that's right in front of me. Holidays weather got me scatterbrained. Alright, so for doing cylinders with liquid in them, I like to pick a point, add my first highlight of color, take some black. This brush is dry as a bone. I was going to use that color as a marker to begin with. So pick an area. His hand is straight down, so we're going to go this way and draw a line around the object. I need to mix more color. I was too reserved with my mixture. There we go. Have paint. This is like the cutoff of where our liquid is in this container. You go all the way around the object. This is why I kept the arm off of him, because I didn't want to do this while dodging his little tool belt and coat and everything. Plus this would have been in the way of the coat. So I'm going to go make a band of this color all the way around. Right? Then need to add a little bit more black to this so it fades nicely. And then just put a band right below that. So go in on this side. And go around. What we're going to do is develop a gradient up to white. And that'll be the top of our liquid. So we can take even our pure sulphurous now, go around, make a little fat band. Around this tube. And so you kind of see how it's starting to look, hopefully, the illusion. God, what are you focusing on? There we go. So the premise is that it's getting brighter as it's going toward the top, and then we're going to add a little bit of this darker yellowy brown up toward the top, and then do some streaks of light. I'm just trying to get a saturated band in here so it's easier to blend. So I'm going to work on this for a little bit. And again, just from black to white here along this little area. Don't worry about this yet. Alright, we have our gradient from our black to our white. Now I've done a little bit of bubbles and stuff sticking to the inside of the glass in here. So when it's being held this way, it looks like the fluid's kind of sloshed around and stuck to the inside of the glass. Now up on the top, I'm going to take some of your black and yellow. Get that nice greeny gook looking color. and then you want to add some of that as a reflected color up on the top of the inside of the black, and leave the black underneath. So you want black directly against, so it's almost like you went gradient gradient, but you're not going all the way up on this one. But what you are going to do is add glass reflections, and then avoid any sort of bubbles or anything that you painted in there earlier. So take a little bit more yellow, mix up one more time, do one more layer right here, and then that's as far as I would go with the gradient. Quick and simple way to do glass work. Containers. And then there's the trick of the illusion. So take some white, take your brush, and you gotta add those reflections. So we're gonna add one right here, and it's just pulling a line along your cylinder, because your highlights for cylinders run in a line. Alright. So now we got that kind of glass reflection. And then at the top of the cylinder, I'll just make a little T. Right there. And so you do that on two of your viewing sides, so one from this side and one from the back side, and then you have your glass container illusion. Alright, we got our arm done. We did the rest of these little inside panels. Same sort of technique, just not like it's filled with liquid, or halfway filled with liquid. It's just all the way filled with liquid. And then took it off its little stand just to test how it looks there. Looks good. Looks like he's got a little bit of sloshing around goop. So now these little feeder tubes that run around his chest that we have based in that blue-gray, we're going to add some of the contrast Ayendan yellow to it. Just it's kind of like you're looking through glass in one section, you're looking through a tube, or like a charged tube or an energy tube or one of those things. And with all contrast, start heavy, just move it around. If it gets too heavy in a spot, just pull it away. We can go back and add some shadow at the beginning of these tubes, and then some highlights as well. See, we're a little thick here where it's bunching up, so I just dry my brush off, go in there and soak it right out. And that is the next step. So you want to hit all your gray tubes running around on the model. This is just on his chest. I'm looking here at the backpack, so it runs all the way from the backpack here back around his body. It's so weird how this camera focuses. But yeah, the Ayendan yellow looks really nice over that. And then we'll look at highlighting it. So let's get interesting with these tubes. I'm going to take and do kind of a dot pattern, make it look like there's sort of bubbles and things running. So dash and a dot, another dot, another dash through here. Just different sizes of things, just to make it look like it's bubbling and gurgling through the pipes. Do another dash over here. You don't have to worry about wrapping it all the way around the tube. Just making sure that the color is nice and opaque. And then once you finish that, you can highlight a few areas and then go up. Right, add some brightness to it. You can just hit some of the top areas of those little bubble sort of things, give it some dimension, right? Running through his and around his chest area. Fun stuff. I just ate a big Thanksgiving thing at my son's school, so if I sound lethargic, it's because I am. Alright, there we go. Another thing this helps with is the fact that these three tubes are separate parts and you have to glue them together floating in space. Not particularly well thought out design in that sense, so if you have any bad seams in here, this will help hide that. Now let's go back to our dead flesh for these fleshy pipes. God dang, I said it again. I'm not gonna say that. It's like you don't remember it until it actually happens. And just add a little bit of highlight here, and maybe some on the back, just to define the shape a little bit more and add some value, like interest to it. We have some of those on the backpack as well, a little bit smaller, but kind of hit that ridge there, and then come down and highlight these edges. Alright, we got clowns in the building. So the liquid here on these tubes done the same way as we did it for his little injector gun, and over here on the syringe that's hanging down, I did a little H stripe down there. I might knock that out a little bit. I don't like how wide it is. What else did we do? We did these little kind of, I guess, little energy barbs or something. I don't know what those things are supposed to be, like extra goop containers for the syringe. We've done those in more of a gem-like pattern, so just highlight from an opposite perspective and then put a white dot on the underside, and these two little coils up top here, same thing, just highlight toward the front edge like a natural object, just adding that same yellow to it. And then we've got the arm on. We're going to work on this hose. There is a mold seam right here that I am going to just paint around using that same sort of patterning, but doing it in a black and gray tone instead. So like the tube's feeding in something, it's going into his heart and then coming out a different color. So the same black and gray that we did on the other tube, so it's that little bit of a blue mix. And then we'll just do a little cross section for that here. So I'll kind of do a break here, straighten out my bristles on my brush, and then highlight it. You can go more solid with your dark colors and wait to add the bubbly effect with the last two bright layers that we're going to do on this. It kind of comes around and it connects into that backpack, so the backpack has the same sort of black blue here, and it really does not want, there we go, right there on the coming out. There's two other little bulbs here we need to address with the yellow too, right underneath. Missed those, man, missing everything. We're getting close to the end here, doing our faces. So the severed head is going to be carne matte, flat flesh, and the dark flesh from Model Color for his head. We're going to do a contrast on both these of the Reichland flesh shade. Or actually, let's do Gilliman. I'm going to do Gilliman flesh. I think this is what I was talking about. I just named it wrong. Because I wanted to use the contrast. Reichland flesh shade is what we use for the gold. That's right. Yeah, so getting out our liner. Now it does take a couple coats of your flesh tone, so don't get rushed. Don't try to gob it on. Just do a bunch of little light coats, and then we're going to knock in this Gilliman flesh, which is pretty dark, and that's okay because we're going to highlight back up. We started very light. Just got to make sure not to let it pool in the eyes too much, even if the eyes are sewn shut. It's pretty brutal. And same for him. So it should have a different, just a slightly different tone for his flesh as opposed to the sewn up head there. And it just, the flesh shade helps you pick out all these details. And again, kind of pulling it out of the eye but you see you get all these little wrinkles and stuff. That'll help guide us on the path of shading up or highlighting up his face. I'm gonna have to give this a minute to dry before we get going again, and start back with a pure highlight of the dark flesh, and start adding some tones into it after that. Alright, now that we're dry, we can start highlighting up. You want to work fairly thin. Shouldn't be too much of an issue with flesh tones. They coat fairly thin anyway. Then we're using our pure dark flesh again, smoothing out all those areas that got a little pooled up on, got the kind of that wash texture. He's got that sourpuss on, like he just walked through somebody's fart. But evenly highlighting for this, for a model that you're going to see on the table. Going less for dynamic lighting, more for like a natural all-around light, and accentuating the shapes. Got kind of a big wrinkle, a band that goes across his nose here. I'll need to hit, and then all these little wrinkles and furrowed brow marks. And his head's pretty smooth, so I'll have a pretty smooth highlight on his head and get rid of, again, these wash marks that are in here. Alright, so we got our layer of flesh on. We're adding a little bit of white to that dark flesh, mixing it up over here, making use of all of my palette space. And we'll hit the chinny chin chin. And again, we're kind of working inside our previous highlights. And yes, this can be difficult. These are very tiny eye-shaped spaces. So if you're uncomfortable, do less layers. But at least attempt this first one. Now we're separating the nostril from the tip of the nose a little bit more with color. He's actually got a lot of detail in his face. A lot. He's got this upper eyelid that runs along top of the eye, and then a lower eyelid. We're just getting all these nice little details highlighted up. And again, this is just a little bit of white added. Alright, got that layer done. These layers are going to move progressively faster because you're going to be doing less and less, centering the highlight more toward the center forward part of the face, and anything that's jutting out a little bit farther. So I'm going to step this up again, adding some white, and I'm going to take a pinch of some yellow air and add that to my highlight. Alright, so just to show you what it's going to look like on the bridge of the nose here, and on the front, leaving a little space in between. So you see how right here and here the luminosity just comes up just a little bit more. And again, we're rolling, added some highlight from here forward, leaving that base color. You can see the dividing line run right about there. For the highlight starting on the head, we're going to give him that Mr. Clean shine. Alright, we did one final highlight with almost white here on this eyebrow here, a little bit on the tip of the nose, tiny bit right here on the chin and the ear. We painted his command stead bolt gun, and now we're going to add a little bit of color to his face, just a little bit. I'll grab some of this magenta here. It does not take much red to add red to a face, so you want to be very careful with how much red you add to your flesh tone. So you see this little difference here. I know it's far away, but always err on the side of less, because you can always go back and fix the less by adding more. Adding a little bit to his lip there. You can see the color shift. And then under his eyes, on top of his cheeks a little bit. I don't want him to be rosy cheeked. I also don't want him to be completely dead in the face. Grab like a little bit more. And come in. And this is more of a glaze, so you can see the tip of the brush. There's a very light amount of paint on it. You can see his cheeks are just a little bit more lifelike. And we're going to take a little bit of white here, tiny, tiny, tiny dot. And we're going to hit his lip. There we go. Little tiny dot highlight right there on the lip. So he's got some redness there. We're going to paint his eyes. We're going to go probably for like an ice blue with the color of his eye in there. But first we need to drop in like a little bit of a light skin tone. So almost where your highlight was, right here. For eyes. And then we'll come in and barely hit this eye here. I got a little bit on his bottom eyelid, but we'll go clean that up off camera. Alright, went in and cleaned up his eyes here. Took a little bit of purple in their flesh tone. You can see the mix right there. Just to line around the eyes where I'd gotten my overages with the white. And then came in and dotted the irises black. And just a little dab of blue in there to get that blue. And his eyes are kind of small to actually get an eye color in. And of course he's got that I smelled the fart look on his face. Next we're going to address the hair. We're going to start with a little bit deeper of a gray because he's got white hair. He's got that nice rockin' silver mane. So taking a little bit of our black. Take more than that. And then some white. Start fairly deep. And I'm going to give it a little pinch of yellow. Just for like, you know, it might have been blonde at one time and we're going gray. And just a base coat there. Be sure to leave kind of a black outline around the object as you're working on it. Again, object separation can be pretty important when viewing things small. We're stepping our layer color up, just adding a little bit of white to that mix. And then coming in, brightening up the hair. We're going to take this all the way to white, but white's going to be like the really pinpoint highlight for it. We'll go bright. And this is sort of our bottom guideline. So we're going for a little bit of a fade from dark to light. And of course we have shadow areas. Once we get a couple layers up, I might add some striations here instead of just going flat, you know, like this. Instead of just having this big swath of hair-like shape. But for now, we're building it up. Alright, once we finish that layer, we're going to step it up again with my wiggly camera. Pretty good step up here, as you can see on the palette. Mixing into my previous color. Jump into position. And then we're going to start adding those bands. Divide this section up into like 3 shapes here. See, I'm going inside my previous layer, and then I'll hit the top, connect the top. Bring this down around, but see how the hair is starting to get brighter. We still got that little bit of a dingy yellowish to it, which, you know, chaos. Alright, we're continuing to add white to our mix. And we're almost there to our pure white. Pure white. Dividing up this section of hair. That's a really hard break. I do not like that break. There we go. Just need to thin that out a little bit. So see what I'm doing? I'm taking these bigger shapes. So this is like one big panel of hair here. And we got 1, 2, 3 streaks in there. So breaks it up some. Alright, once we have that done, we're going to our pure white. Pure. These will be really small accents to the hair. Try to hit those high points. Treat hair almost like a cylindrical, non-metallic. With the wavy bits. So like a pipe. Hair is just a pipe. Head pipe. And then we're leaving it pretty dark back there by the collar. The top of that hair now. That should be hair done there. So now we got some nice wavy white gray hair. Alright, we've glued the backpack on. So now the bottle's looking a little more Doc Ocky. So we're taking a mix of dead flesh and the standard carne mats, flat flesh, and we're going to highlight up the severed head. This is not going to be as rendered as Fabulous's Bile. Fabius Bile's face. Fabuloso. That's his drag name. Sorry, not drag. Slanesh. That's his Slanesh name. So that's kind of the scale. You know, if there's two faces on a model, I mean, it's a high level model. Not studio, not competition, just high level. The second face is going to get a little bit more of a rushed treatment. I've already spent a real decent amount of time painting this up, over a day. Three days in timeline, over a day and hours on it. And we'll pale it out a little bit more, add a little bit more green in there, make it look sickly. When I say green, it's the dead flesh. And then for the sutures on the lips and the eyes, we'll go in and do a... I'm trying to think what color would look nice. Probably a black. We'll do some black stitching. And then for the hair, we'll do just a brown hair. I'll think about that. Alright, for the stitching, we did a base coat of black with a little bit of a gray highlight on them, a little bit haphazard. The hair is a base of earth brown from Vallejo Game Color, and then we're going to use contrast snakebite leather on that. So this is the earth, which I believe we used before in this video. Maybe we haven't. And I'm going to take my contrast snakebite. We're going to put that over the hair for a brown hair. So it's like just a tad bit darker, so it shades it real nicely. We can go back and add a few highlights to the hair so it's not just one monotone thing. Ooh, that's a lot. It's okay. Trying to figure out, I think she's like tied by her hair to his belt. If it's a her. I don't know. Can't distinguish. Could just be one of them dirty space elves. Getting dirty looks. Alright, so we're going to let that dry. We'll hit it with a few highlights. We'll just take the earth and add a little bit of white to it and do a few layers here. Kind of treat it like we did his hair, but a little bit more, again, quick. Because it's not a focal point. You're not looking at that head as much as you're looking at his. And we're going to take the other arm, glue that on while we're waiting for that to dry. For his corset straps here, we're going to take some of the Magos purple, put it in there. We glued the arm on. Magos is a little lighter in coverage, which is nice. So you can kind of tone those light grays more toward a tone that you're looking for. And I thought this would look pretty good. It's kind of a little bit brighter, and it'll work with the purple that we got. It's a little redder, a little more magenta. And then what we'll do is we'll add a little bit of this to our palette, and we can mix it with a little bit of white. Go here, go here. The white will thicken it up, and we can use it as a highlight for those areas. But our hair is dry, so we're gonna highlight that up. Take this brown here, earth brown. We're going to address the severed head. I mean, how much do you got to piss somebody off that they just want to carry your head around? It's got to stink. It's probably got like a bruise on his thigh. Well, I guess it is banging against his armor, but... can't be comfortable though. It's like taking a bowling ball and strapping it to your leg. Why? Alright, take a little bit of our white here. Add some earth. And just do a couple more highlights here. See how I'm leaving the bottom here darker? Just doing a natural highlight. Maybe do a few little pips here and there on some of the strands of hair, like at the bottom where you have a sharp point coming out. And she's pretty shadowed over here. Do heads have genders when they're removed? I don't know. Alright. We're there. Head's there. Now we need to do some edge highlighting on this cane. And let this dry just a little bit more. So let me mix up some stuff for the cane. Decided the cane is going to mimic the cloak. So using the same base colors to do an edge highlight. And yes, these edges will pick up on the side of a brush, so you don't have to pull down. And then we're highlighting kind of up into the flat spaces. We will progressively add white. And then just highlight up. Probably build to the top. So layering your edge highlights. Scary. Gotta do edge highlight 1 and edge highlight 2. Edge highlight 3. Starting to break up the shapes a little bit, and add a little bit to the bottom too. So we got this like kind of a dynamic going between the top and the bottom of the cane. So I'm just going to continue working on this for a little bit, and then we'll highlight this up. Then we'll look at basing. Alright, we went a little more blackout with the highlights on the cane here. Real stark edge and almost all the way up to white. We did add a little bit of blue. You can see here I kind of scrubbed the blue back alive to it, so it just complements, but at the same time it's just a tad different. Now we're going to take these straps here. We've got some wash that's been sitting there for a little bit. Contrast paint, sorry, not wash. And mix up a little bit of white pigment in there. Just bring these up. Subtle change, but again, add some difference to it. Highlight the loops as they go into the grommets here, and then probably build it up one more layer. As they pass over each other, you know, as they just poke out more, right? As they break the plane. Alright, then one more mixture here. A little bit brighter. So now we got a nice smooth transition on these straps. Adding progressive layers of highlight. Refreshing my brush load. Anytime the paint starts acting like you don't want it to, reload your brush, refresh your brush load. And then if it's not acting like you want it to, right off the brush, reload it. Alright, so now we got some good definition here in those straps. I believe this is it. If I haven't forgotten anything like I have been doing throughout this entire video, we're going to move on to basing. I'm going to go pick out some flocks and products that I would like to see on this base. We're going to use some of those nice new, what are they called? Gamer grass, laser cut plants. I'm going to pull some of those and use them because they're cool. Alright, found two flocks that I really like. It's these, it's like grass with flock on it, sort of deal, but they're, these, I have no idea what brand they are. We just had them in a donated cache of stuff. So I got a green and a tan. I'm going to probably go back and airbrush these a little bit just to blend them in. I've just stuck them in place with the sticky stuff that's on the base. That is not meant to adhere flocking to a base. That is meant to adhere the flocking into a clump. So do not use that unless you want them falling off over time, because that stuff gets considerably less sticky over time. I'm going to go in, kind of pre-trim these a little bit. It's okay to cut your flock, trim your bush. I'm sure your gaming partners will appreciate it. So glue those down. I'll probably trim these little stems off too. There. And the other cool thing that we got, and I'm going to put these on the other side as well, is these, it's called dumb cane, which is a plant. But these come out, and then these just drop out. I'm going to put one of these on the base. You don't have to cut. You just got to kind of gently tease these out of their out of their homes. So you get that, and then you get progressively smaller in the same kind of color scheme, and then you layer them up. So I'm missing this size here. They're cut really fine. I just got out the same size. Maybe it's this one. There we go. Here, you can stop watching me fiddle with this. Alright, I got my 3 progressive sizes out here. I put the other little one back here in the case. So to get these sort of rounded, you can just sort of massage the leaf. You can also take a tool, like I have dental tools all over the place. Dental tools are amazing, and especially if you're in the hobby realm, and kind of curl them around it. So like take the tip and then push it around, but it's easier for me to take and just manipulate. Yes, it's easier. Fun stuff. There we go. So once you get it kind of rounding out, you just sort of push back and forth and then crimp so the leaves are standing up, kind of making them look a little more natural. And then you do the same thing for each layer and then glue them together. So I'll get them all prepped and rounded up and looking not flat, and we'll glue them in. Alright, we got our first plant in. A little handy tool is one of these dental tools with like a little ball on the end. You just press it down in the middle. So we're going to get our next piece. I'm going to be smart. Grab my tweezers. Come on, glue. You guys like watching glue move slowly through a bottle, right? And then we'll get this into position. Let go. Take the dental tool and press down into the center like that. Letting the leaves kind of overlap at that 50% mark. And we don't want to raise up until it's dry. So, yeah. There we go. And we have to, oops. Alright, I'm going to pause it there. Alright, I'm prepared now. I have got it on the glue. Use kicker on this other one. I'm going to take it. I'm going to turn it a little bit. Make it where it's interesting. And then this tool even has like a little smaller bulb that you can push down in. And then I'm going to get my assistant. I have a third hand to use a kicker. That should be good. Awesome. Alright, so now we got a nice little plant. I'm gonna clean this up just a little bit with some base. Let's take the airbrush after I trim some of these and put some undershading on some of these plants. I'm taking some indigo from the FW inks, and we're gonna lay in some shadows with a little less pressure. Oop, there we go. My trigger was jammed. Just along the back, kind of cooling things off back here. Get a little bit of the leaves. Taking care not to really ride up on the model too much. Even hit the inside of the plant a little bit, just to add some character to it. Make it a little bit different than it would be if someone else had used the same things, right? But again, if you're watching this video, do it the same way. You see how that shadow along the bottom of the flock here sort of leads you into the model a little bit more. And then we're just going to take some black and clean up that base. There you have it. Fabius Bile in all his glory. We got the base blacked out. We got a matte varnish on. So we knocked out a little bit of the shine that we were having, like overly shiny, with some of the washing techniques that we did. I feel like a matte coat on metallics is still acceptable. It's still going to give you that glittery sort of metallic feel. You can see it happening in here as I move the model around. But as you know, or as you figured, it's probably the end of the video. So if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, I'd be happy to discuss that with you. And as always, happy painting.